today, Bishop Francis went to celebrate the feast of the Lord's Supper at a juvenile detention center. Many of you may have read that. And the juvenile detention center had a little less than 50 young people there, boys and girls, and various ages, young teens. And they were from different countries and even different religions. There were many Muslims among them. And Jesus washed the feet of 12 of them, some of them Muslims, some of them women, and it was a very mixed crowd. But a very beautiful and touching ceremony, from what I gather. At one point, when he was with them, one of the youngsters asked him, "Why have you come here to us?" And Pope Francis said, "You know," he said, "I had a feeling in my heart that this was something I needed to do." And he said, "You know, sometimes you get a feeling in your heart that you want to do something good." And he says, and maybe you'll have that in your life, and it's best to follow through on that, to do the good thing that you feel in your heart. You know, not a great theological answer, probably a profoundly theological answer, and yet a profoundly wonderful answer. To speak to a bunch of young people and to talk to them about following their heart when their heart leads them to do something good, something beautiful for God. And I was thinking about that, and I thought to myself, I wonder how Jesus came up with the idea of washing the feet of the apostles at the Last Supper. You know, was it something that he had planned for a long time? And I have to tell you, I think not. As you know, the washing of the feet occurs only in the Gospel of John. But what's interesting, it is just before this incident, when Jesus is over in the house of Lazarus, who has been raised from the dead, and the woman comes to Jesus and washes his feet, and with her tears, and dries his feet with her hair. And Jesus remarks about the tremendous love that is shown at that moment. Was it that action by that woman that gave Jesus, who shared our human nature, the idea that that's such a beautiful action, that's what I want to bring to the apostles, to my apostles at the Last Supper? I think if you read John carefully and if you see the juxtaposition of these texts, it's probably what John was thinking, that's where Jesus got this idea. It was a beautiful idea that he had in his heart, something that he wanted to do. And that was what it was. And it was so profoundly moving at that moment that Jesus made it something that he wanted to recommend to all of his followers. As I have done, so you also should do for one another. It's interesting, isn't it, that at the Last Supper, there are two instances in which Jesus essentially says, "Do this in memory of me." He says it certainly at the end of the confection of the Eucharist, after he says, "This is my body, this is my blood." And, he tells them, "Do this in memory of me. Continue this." But Jesus also, maybe using slightly different words, says the same thing after he washes their feet. "As I have done, so you also should do. Do this in memory of me." Follow through on what your heart tells you is the loving thing to do, especially when it leads you in a very humble way to touch the life of another person who's in need, another person who is confused, another person for whom darkness has covered their life. The Pope said something really beautiful to the young people just as he was leaving, apparently, from what I read. And it was something along the lines of, never let anything rob you of hope. It's a very profound little message. Again, it is spoken to people in a juvenile detention center. It is so easy to fall into hopelessness. And again, I'm sure that he said it, not because he had planned to say it. You know, he didn't sit down at his little desk and figure out, well, at the end, I think I'll say this. It was something that his heart was moved to do. It was something I need to do. In his homily, he said, I'm here because I felt that this is where Jesus would want me to be. So that's the lesson of the Holy Father, but it's also a profound lesson for the feast that we're celebrating today. Always follow what your heart tells you is to be done in love, even if it requires humility and if it requires service. You can be sure that you're following in the footsteps of the Lord.